Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. Today was Qatar. It was a interesting race. We'll talk a little bit about that more in a second. Rob, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really good actually. We've had a good race weekend. Again, we'll come to which parts of it each of us preferred as we get there. But I started the day off with a 10-mile run in preparation for the Hartford Half Marathon next week. So
Wow.
anyone in the local area that's listening who's running next week, then I'll be wearing the same Dirty Side top as I wore last year. So yeah, came back, sat and watched Arsenal beat Manchester City, which was amazing, and then also sat down and watched the race. So I've had a bit of a banger of a day actually, and now I'm on the beer. So everything's good.
It's
But
pretty good.
yeah, let's keep our powder dry for what we thought of the
Yeah.
race
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we might have a discussion around that one. So yeah, let's jump into what we've got today. We've got news and social, Brian's video vault, and then the rest of it is pretty much race weekend pulling apart
The,
because with the
the
sprint
sprint
weeks we've got a lot to
weekends,
talk
yeah,
about.
exactly. These sprint weekends, they pack so much in. And this time, I enjoyed this race a lot. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Well,
So
we'll
let's
get
talk
to
about
that,
the
and
news,
then
Rob. Yeah, kick us off with
yeah,
some
and
news here.
we've got no race preview because there is nothing next week, right? Unless I've
Nope.
messed up, because if
Nope.
there is, we didn't do any research on next week's
A
race.
week off and then
So,
Coda. Week off and then.
okay, so yeah, it's kind of more highbrow news this week.
A
Normally,
lot of
we
business news.
yeah, a lot of business news.
A
Normally,
lot of
we dredge to
business.
find some real kind of silly stories that we have fun with, but we've got to put our serious faces on here because it's all going to be business. It's business.
Let's do business, a little business. We're businessmen today.
So we've been following this one for a while. Andretti, their bid got formally approved by the FIA, so they got the big rubber stamp of seal of approval out and whacked it down on the paperwork. Um, but it doesn't mean anything really. All that really does is give the green light to F1 and Liberty Media to reject it. I mean, sorry, they have to now review it. There's no defined period for them to review it. They have to do an assessment, which will take months. But F1 is widely expected to reject Andretti's bid. I
Well,
mean,
we'll see. We'll see. You heard on this here podcast, I predicted the day that Andretti put that weirdo tweet out, and we found out the money behind it was real money behind other things in the U.S. that most people don't realize, like the Dodgers and other teams. I think there's a real chance because it's all about the money. I mean, it's everything comes down to money. This ain't a nonprofit organization. F1, yeah, it's a public company. This is for the money. So when they see the money that Andretti's bringing to the table, I'd be shocked if this doesn't go.
uh, but Andretti aren't going to be bringing any money to the table unless Liberty Media make them, right? Because that's going to be the sticking point. At the moment, they're going to bring the 200 million or whatever it is dilution fee
Right,
to
and the
go, here you
teams
go,
think it's not
everyone.
enough.
And the teams think it's not enough because when that was set a couple of years back, the eyeballs and the value of the sport have skyrocketed. So they think that number should be much bigger because it sounds like a big number, but once you slice it 10 ways, 20 million at the moment actually isn't going to fund that much extra for each team in terms of what they'll lose in terms of a slice of the pie. So I kind of get it. The value of the sport has gone up a lot. So I'm kind of with you in a way. I don't think Andretti and GM arriving at the table with bags of cash makes any difference. They can have all the cash they want in the world until F1 and Liberty turn around and say, and we're going to take this amount off you. The
Right.
200 million has now become X. And if that X is valid and Andretti want in, then they'll be in. If it's too high and they price them out of it, then that's how I think the other story we broke the other week about the European anti competition laws, I think might fall flat on its face because if they come back and say we value F1 as a sport as X, so therefore you've now got to pay Y to come in, and Andretti say, oh, that's too rich for us, and they walk away from the poker table, then they walked away. It's not. It'll be a difficult one to see that they
Yeah.
can force it through. So who knows?
Agreed, but I think the other news we saw this week that Chris Medland reported that Rodin was looking at buying AlphaTauri, and the price tag was nearing $1 billion, which the head of the organization, David Dicker or something like that, said that's commercially unviable. We should have bought Williams when we had a chance a handful years ago. Yeah,
Yep.
no doubt. But we
Yeah,
all
you
should have
should.
bought the Cowboys, 20 years ago for $30 million. That's now worth $2 billion. I mean, you just can't predict the future. But yeah, nearing $1 billion for AlphaTauri. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean Williams. You mentioned them. They've come out this week. James Vowles basically said they're not up for an 11th team. Lawrence Stroll came out and put this big long video. Well, it wasn't that long, but it was long enough video that was trying to make out that if it ain't broke, don't fix it vibes. He was trying to get across, and it was veiled attempt at saying we don't want to slice the pie any further. So they feel like they're closing ranks. A lot of sort of sports commentators I've been listening to, they think because Liberty is an American organization that they're almost entrenched in the idea of a franchise, which, as we all know, you guys don't have things like a meritocracy in your NFL, NBA. It's a closed shop. There is no
Right.
relegation and promotion. So are they going to treat F1 like a franchise and say, no, it's 10? It's 10 teams. I don't know. I'll be interested to see which way this one goes. I would like to see more cars on the grid. I don't mind it going back up to the days when I first got into it, when there were a lot more cars on. They're going to need to make the cars smaller, I think, to make that feasible, which we'll come to later. But yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see.
We also heard that Williams' revenue in 2022 went up based on filings to 142.8 million pounds, which is a whopping 46 plus million more than 2021 when they were just under 100 million pounds in revenue. So I love to see that. Wherever there are filings made public where we can see things like that and we see the revenue that Williams generated with a bad season, that's pretty darn good. So again, the value of F1 continues to rise. I think we're all kind of curious where the peak is. Have we hit a plateau, whether that's viewership? Last week we talked about social numbers. Don't worry. We at the Dirty Side, we'll keep our eye on it for you.
Then kind of a story that we wanted to talk about, despite the fact it was blatantly obvious by the fact that we're already post-race weekend now, that Lawson was replacing Danny Rick again for Qatar. And if it had just been that as a story, I wouldn't have bothered picking it up. But it was the manner in which it happened. Lawson saying that he got a random FaceTime number came through on his phone, which he decided to pick up, which, so if you want to stalk him and FaceTime, then chances are he's going to answer. He answers random numbers. And it turned out to be Danny Rick saying, yeah, exactly. Can you imagine it? Block.
Yeah, I mean, I would have hung up. And it was Danny Rick on the other side.
It was Danny Rick on the other side. They've taken a look at it and they're like, you know what? There is no real need to push Danny Rick back. Lawson's doing such a good job, I think. Really, it was obvious. It's like, if there's even the slightest doubt that his hand's not ready, it's not like Lawson is trundling around in 20 and crashed every single time. So quite the opposite, in fact. So good to see Lawson out there again this weekend.
And then a quick one.
Well, I was going to say the next note is yours because I mean, there's about 3 spelling mistakes on this line, and I have no idea what you're talking about here. So this is yours.
I put this the last minute. We are recording this basically right after the race, which we'll get to in a second. So it was great that Liam was at the race. Just a quick side note. We have an exchange student arriving at my house from Germany shortly. I'm not going to name her name because it's a private family matter of having an extra person in your house, but I shall refer to her as Heinz Harold for the entire,
oh my gosh,
for the entire time that she's here. And then we are flipping that around, and my daughter, the American, shows up in Germany next summer. And last night, my wife and I went out for dinner. I'd been out of town for a while, and so the two of us went out, and we were talking about the trip. Because what we're going to do is pick my daughter up in Zurich. Instead of having her fly home, we'll pick her up there, and we'll start like our leg of the trip after her exchange. And I said, hold on a second. I've got an idea. And so I opened up my phone, and I looked, and I'm thinking to myself, there's a race in Austria, and I'm so excited. I'm like, we're going to Spielberg, and we're going to go to the Red Bull Ring. We're going to Austria.
And you're going to take your laptop and your microphone so you can record the pod there.
And my wife said, are you effing kidding me? I'm not watching go-karts go around a track on our European vacation. And it was shot down so fast. I felt just like this. She told me no.
Well, you still got to take the laptop anyway. I mean, you got to brief her that there is still going to need to record a podcast about go-karts going around in circles.
But, I'm so excited though. I'll be able to watch races at the proper time. And I'll actually have 2 because I'll probably be on the flight over, or maybe even there the week before they're somewhere else, Spain, I think. So,
as long as you organise your vacation around the pod schedule, I don't mind where you go.
I mean, basically, I even looked at my wife. I'm like, well, if we're like on our way, if we haven't gone too far west, because it's east of Zurich, so I'm like, it really screws up the whole thing. Couldn't they have could we put Paul Ricard back on the map and swap him next year with Austria just for me? No, I'll be going right through.
It's not even worth that. Like, me and Paul will shout that down. You're not having that. So
I know.
Anyway,
moving on. Back to cars on track.
So we teased it earlier about dropping weight. So F1 are in the process of looking at ditching the 18-inch wheels for 2026. There's a whole bunch of things they're looking at the moment to try to drop car weight, drop car size, because essentially, it sounds like to me, the new power units that we'll have in 2026 are lawnmower engines. and they're worried that trying to drag the huge tanks that we have at the moment around the circuit with a lawnmower engine isn't going to be enough. So they're looking at ways of making the cars lighter. One of the big ways, and also sort of counteract the effect of having a weaker engine. So one of those is to go after weight. One of those is to go after drag. And some of the draggiest areas on the car are the wheels because they just like slam into the air. So they're like, well, we're not going to go back to the really small wheels when they look like kind of those little lifesaver mints. So yeah,
piano wheels on the bottom of a big ass piano.
But 16-inch wheels might be a trade off here, where we can have smaller profile, less drag, less weight. Don't like this story at the moment because it seems to be building us up to the fact of like these new cars are going to be slow.
I don't know. We'll see.
What I'm hoping is they are talking about the size and the weight. So if we can go to smaller cars of yesteryear with slightly less power in them, well, the weight and the size should mean that they can still hit the speeds. Yeah, we got a while to go. Yeah, it's 2026, but I don't like some of the noises coming around this.
So one thing I was thinking about this weekend, before I even saw that you put this story in here, there were so many problems with track limits the whole weekend, even before they reprofiled the track. And so as we look at that, a lot of the drivers were actually saying they couldn't even see where the lines were. And part of it is those giant wheels sticking up in front of them. We heard that early. No, we did. We heard that earlier in the season. They already had limited visibility. They're so low in the cockpit. And then you put these massive wheels in front of them, and it blocks a little bit more of their view. So I don't know if that would help them see, but I was thinking, boy, those tires are large. And Rob, look at you with a story just to make us think about getting smaller tires. All right.
It wasn't really a tire-based story. But anyway, that was the news and social this week. So let's crack open the video vault and keep...
I'm going to go to the old one. Yeah, the old one sucked. The lease is better. Okay, so welcome to the video vault.
What was that?
That was the old open.
Yeah, but don't do the old open. It's awful.
I forgot. I just wanted to check it again. All right, Lee. All right, we'll go back to Lee's here. It's opening. It's better. It's better.
There we
go.
I know this. It is better. I'm not sure what you're doing there. You're going...
I'm going rogue.
Freestyling.
I am. Only 2 this week. It was a bit of a busy week, but these are 2 good ones. So I'm delivering high quality, low quantity. My pole and podium at Monza with the Tifosi by Carlos Sainz on his channel, the Carlos Sainz channel, in his Don't Blink series. It's only his 4th one of the year, so he doesn't crank these things out that often. And they're usually about a month behind, and this is, again, Monza, so it's about right. It's 10 minutes. I loved it. It was just kind of like behind the scenes, watching Carlos's time at Monza from the pole position to fighting. They kind of go quickly over the race, and especially when Charles was sliding silly behind him at the end of the straight. But so it's worth it. I enjoyed seeing it. It's not great, but I definitely enjoyed it. And I've watched all of these, just so you know. I don't miss a Don't Blink, and normally they're not worth watching. So this time, check it out. But the good one, the most amazing video of the week, and quite frankly, in a while, we're back karting, the Lando log, 028. So it's apparently the 28th of Lando's logs, video logs that he's done. It's on the Lando Norris channel. So apparently my theme this week was just scouring driver channels. It's 10 minutes exactly to the dot. It is so good. It's Lando and Oscar and Zach karting in Italy in little Lando Norris go-karts that, the ones he makes. Now, and I say little because, they fit Lando, they fit Oscar, and then Zach gets in. Not so good.
Donkey Kong.
Yeah, basically. And I feel for Zach, I do. As a larger man, at least for me, height and width, and I've actually put on a little bit of depth as well, I guess, in the last couple months. But it is unfair that the cart doesn't make up the weight difference. I've mentioned this before on here. I've gone karting with friends, and I'm a good 60 pounds, 50 pounds heavier than a lot of my friends, especially the skinny ones. They should be made to put 50 pounds of weight in the cart, and then we go racing. It is an unfair advantage that they don't like pizza as much as I do, or lifting weights, or height. But
I'm gonna get the smallest violin in the world out and start playing it for you in a minute.
But check it out. We're back karting on the Lando channel. It's definitely worth it. It's a great 10 minutes. And that's it. It's only 2 this week, so I'm closing it up using the traditional one so Rob doesn't get mad. And we've closed it up. Rob, to you, because this was a very... It felt like an even bigger sprint weekend than normal for some reason, because every single event had like stuff going, like special storylines.
And I'm just dropping this on you. We didn't discuss this before we started recording, but given that friend, legend, Pitlane Paul, has dropped us 3 reviews because he thought it was such a busy weekend. Did we cover practice and quali and then drop the first
Yeah,
Pitlane Paul
why
review for
not?
Friday? Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
let's
do
not
it.
cue him
Let's
up.
shake it
We
up.
can do
Yeah.
that.
Woohoo!
Now, do I do
If
the music?
Pirelli,
Do I do the
no,
music
don't do
three
the music.
times?
No, I think in the same way that they don't have a podium for the sprint, we don't have the music for Paul until the
Race review.
Sunday,
Yeah,
the
good,
race review.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean,
Look
if
at
Pirelli can
us.
Pirelli can mess around on the day of the race with tire changes, we can mess around with Pitlane Paul changes. So, practice. Not a lot really. I've got to be honest. It was the same on a sprint weekend. They kind of tried to cram in what they can. Max led the 2 Ferraris. Ferrari looked quick. Alonso was in 4th, ahead of Checo, which was maybe foreshadowing that Aston were going to have an okay weekend. Haas were mixing it up there. The Hulk was right up there, and McLaren seemed to be struggling down in 9th and 10th. So shows you how much practice matters. But anyway, Williams came in 11th and 12th with Logan actually ahead of Alex. So I was like, ooh, okay, that's interesting. It's the first time we've seen that happen for a while. But that was kind of practice. But you've got a particular piece that you loved in practice, which is a certain story that was told.
Well, and just the tiny 4-second background, since we're all just sitting here on bar stools talking about the race weekend. Rob had to watch this with no sound. I was in a car, so I listened to it with no video. And so the two of us
it's like see no evil, hear no evil.
Exactly.
That old,
Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. I don't know which one of us is which because I can't remember which one had sight and sound, but doesn't matter. Point is, we chatted afterwards, and both of us had learned things because Rob told me what he saw, and I'm like, oh, fascinating. And I told him what I heard because I heard a story, and he laughed. And the story was this. Bernie Collins, who, as we've said many times, is a gem. They had her on F1 TV because that's all I could stream on my phone, and it was good. And they asked her a question about excuses. And I'm pretty sure it was Jolyon Palmer and Alex Jakes, and they were talking about driver excuses. And they said, Jolyon, have you ever used any of these excuses? The wind in particular, because it was gusty, and there were people being caught out at a couple of the corners, which ended up becoming a theme through the weekend. And they said, have you used the wind as an excuse? He would say, no, I would never do that, sarcastically, and then highlighted a variety of answers people have used over time, from the sun and the dust and the sand on the track, and they went through about 100 of them. But then they asked Bernie, how about you? Running strategy at Aston Martin and all your time in F1. And she said, I once had a driver tell me that a helicopter took off and messed up the air around the car. And everyone laughed hysterically, and they said, who was it? And she said, oh, I can't say. And so 30 seconds later, they came back, Bernie, come on, you got to tell us who it was. And she looks around, and Lance Stroll had said that a helicopter taking off had apparently messed up the downforce and the aero package of his car. And the team went on to do some research to find out, the data, was it skewed by a helicopter taking off? And somebody on the team apparently found the info that said it was. And then Jolyon said, what, Lawrence Stroll who found the data? And everybody laughed and laughed. That was my favorite story and piece of the weekend. And now I love it. And we'll talk about Lance in a little bit here, but hopefully there weren't too many helicopters over his car the whole time.
So then we headed off to quali. Q1 was kind of, you're right, it was all feeling out track limits, sand, wind, what have you. But we didn't kind of have I don't think any massive surprises in who we lost in Q1. We lost Zhou, K-Mag, Lawson, which, first time he's ever even trucked up to this track, so that probably wasn't a surprise. Stroll, because he's on the never-ending downward spiral right now.
Oh, my gosh.
And Sargent, heartbreaking for him that the one time it looked like he was going to out-qualify his teammate, Albon nailed it by 0.092 of a second on the final corner, and he took Sargent's spot in Q2. But it was a valiant effort. I thought that was a good, it looked like Sargent might have out-qualified Albon. Q2 was the redemption Q2.
It was. Well, we saw Tsunoda, Sainz, Perez, Albon, and Hulk go out eventually, but it was Checo who. So I think what happened was Checo saw Stroll go out in Q1, and he said, "Oh no, I'm not going to let you take title of the pits all by yourself. I'm going to come at this thing here and see if I can snatch victory from the jaws of defeat." Or the other way around. It's the other way around. And so, and then he has a lap time deleted, pops back into the relegation zone, and Valtteri, who had been doing great, but had just been timed out. I was actually watching this, and I'm thinking, oh man, he's going to make it through. He's going to make it, and then no. And then when Perez's time was cut off, Valtteri got a chance to go through to Q3, which was amazing. I loved it. I love seeing it.
Yeah, same here. It was kind of like that. I messaged Paul and I said, do you know, of all the bad luck Valtteri has had recently, I thought it was yet another one where he just gets edged out on the very last person to go over the checkered flag, knocks him out when he's a driver at risk, and then redemption came through of Perez having his lap time deleted. So, yeah, so we went through to Q3. Max nailed a lap, which meant that he had enough time to probably go do some sightseeing, some tourist stuff around Qatar and buy some memorabilia for his family, because I don't even think he needed to come back out again. I mean, he did, and then he messed up and he had to abort that lap, but he didn't need.
No.
And that was a stellar lap. What else do we have? Russell and Hamilton throwing it right up there. The Mercs looking like they were really going to do some damage on this track, which they did. Then
literally nice.
Yeah, literally. And then Lando,
couldn't get a time.
Piastri, they just couldn't get a time. They couldn't stay within track limits, and there was quite a bit of joking around track limits, especially from Piastri, where they interviewed him for being third when they got the three of them together, and then she's mid interview with him and went, you've actually had a time. Yeah, go on.
I was gonna say I actually go back one click. Because they interview Max. We interview Max, and then George, because Lando starts walking away a little bit, and instead of Lando, who was in the top 3, he walks off, and then they kind of give Oscar over to be interviewed. She goes, "Why am I talking to you?" And then Oscar's like, "Well, I think track limits." And so they have a whole interview, and then Naomi is told in her earpiece, I'm assuming, that, oh, no, it's actually now Oscar has track limits. And she breaks it live to him. Did you know you also have track limits? I'm like, why would he know that? He wouldn't have walked up if he knew that. And so he's like, are you serious? And that was a theme through the weekend when people were, giving him news at the interviews. But I thought that was hilarious when we ended up, all the McLaren guys came up to claim their glory, and then they all had to walk away. Like, no, track limits.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that was the story of quali. But the one bit really that didn't like, and despite the fact that I stuck up for him and named him as my third best driver back at the beginning of the season,
go find that sound clip.
You can, but make sure you play the bit where I say, and he'll probably be rubbish later on. Not only has he been rubbish later on, I also didn't care for his attitude. So. Okay, so he's out in Q1. He throws his steering wheel down the front of the car, which apparently scratches the car, probably causes damage to a steering wheel that isn't cheap. It's not like it's for the Nintendo Switch, and he can go and pick another one up from Walmart. So it does that. Fine, whatever. Then did you see where he? They were reporting that he pounded the wall in the
as he walked out. You saw him push the wall. Yep.
But then he also pushed his trainer as well.
Yeah, that's the part I didn't like as much. And it's not even the push. It's the trainer's telling him he has to go get weighed. And it's like procedural stuff. If you don't want to deal with it, just walk past him. You don't have to give him a shove or push his arm down. And it wasn't a big deal. But like, you want to punch the wall, that's on you. You want to throw the wheel, that's a tantrum. You want to push somebody? I mean, come on, man. You can do better than that. That was and
then his interview afterwards, I just didn't like... these aren't exactly like 15, 16-year-old kids that can't look after their emotions, right? So he swears on the interview. He basically gives no answers whatsoever. It just all round just compounded the fact that he's on a downward spiral. And it must be frustrating for him. It absolutely must be frustrating for him, because he knows he was driving so much better at the beginning of the season, and for whatever reason, he just doesn't seem to be able to loop it together anymore. But you don't do that. You just don't do that. It's
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, then we went to Saturday.
And so we said we're gonna play pool.
Oh, that's right. Thanks for reminding me. So we'll save the intro music to later, but here is Paul's report from Friday.
Hey, no, as they say on this podcast. Friday done. I'm going to do a 3-parter just because sprint weekends sort of deserve it. I always moan at Fridays, and quite rightly so, because they are pretty average. Here, of course, obviously being a sprint race, there's something exciting on Friday, and that is a qualifying session for Sunday, which has no bearing on tomorrow, which is a completely new day of a completely new qualifying, a completely new race. The temperature here so far has been about 43 degrees. I can't translate that into American terms, apart from just to say it's bloody hot, and that's the only time I'm going to swear. I could swear many times on here, mainly with my driver Valtteri. Finally, we seem to have had a little bit of performance. Nothing really to do with the car as such. The car was performing really well, but he's just driven the socks off that today. Teammate Joe, desperately unlucky in the qualifying, just getting blocked by Logan. Look, I know we had the same issue going into turn one with Leclerc on somebody else. I can't remember who it was. But ultimately, yeah, that happens. But yeah, apart from that, usual sort of stuff. Verstappen pole. McLaren's looked quick again, even though they've had lap times deleted. Aside from that, no, it was pretty good. The track was super slippy. There was no grip this morning, so it was a bit of a nightmare. But I sort of expected there to be a bit more carnage in qualifying, maybe a couple of accidents, just because of the grip level on the track. Sort of like gives testament to how good these guys really are behind the wheel. So all in all, fantastic day for us. Max looks like he's going to be on course for, well, saying that, we've got a sprint race tomorrow. I think he'll have won the championship then. Perez continues to struggle. Don't really know what's going on there, but that'll sort of do for tonight. We will head into Saturday. I will do another update tomorrow after a completely fresh day, and let's hope for more smiles. And yeah, it's good to sort of be back to form. God love camels. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Paul.
You can hear the wind on that microphone as well.
Yes.
I mean, wow. Yeah, actually, something just talking about like no grip. How many times this weekend did you hear dirty side of the track get referenced?
A ton, or at least they're on the dirty side of the of the grid, or the dirty side of this. I didn't hear a very clear dirty side of the track, but I was, again, I was kind of watching out of the side of my vision at times with other things going on. But yes, I heard it a bunch, and well, it felt like we picked the right name for the podcast.
Especially for Qatar racing, anyway, with all that sand everywhere. So yes, as Paul said, we get to Saturday, we get to the sprint shootout, which is essentially, it's sprint quali. They like to give it a fancy name.
I like it being shorter. I've said this before. The thing I do like about the sprint weekend, the sprint shootout, is the shorter time windows. It makes it valuable the whole time. You don't get 5 minutes in between, Q1 from the first banker laps to when people are going out on the track, and someone goes out of formation, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, we have something to watch for a change." So I kind of like the shorter thing, but in whatever we're calling the first episode of it, we lost both Williams drivers, Lance K-Mag and Yuki in SQ2. I think that's the technical term. We lost the gas man.
I'm calling it SSO1.
Oh, you call it
sprint shootout. Is it sprint shootout? I don't know. Why does the technical term got a Q in it if they don't call it qualifying?
Sprint. I don't know. Good question.
Yeah, exactly.
We lose the gas man, and we lose Lewis, Liam Lawson, Valtteri, and Joe. Both Alfa Romeos go out, and then what became sort of the coolest part of the weekend for me was SQ3, Oscar. And I know we saw Oscar interviewed because we thought he'd moved up to quali and then not. But watching what he did and the way he drove the wheels off that car on Saturday, I loved it. It set up a great Saturday after that, which we'll get into in a second. But someone made the comment on TV, I don't know if it's Karun or whomever, he's no longer a future star. He's a star, full stop.
Yeah, he's just absolutely brilliant. He absolutely nailed it. Put himself on, well, not pole, which, I think it was Naomi had a little slip up, because they got this weird thing where they don't like to call it pole.
Correct.
Because it's not. It's your number one for the sprint shootout. But she got so caught up in the emotion, she asked him, what's it like to be on pole? And he's like, that's great. It's like, you're not on pole, don't worry about it. It's all good. We're going to go with the Oscar hype train. So, we had a few hours to go and, recover from that and think, well, can Oscar turn this into anything, or is Max just going to come storming through? No. Lights out and away we go. Oscar nails it. Mm-hmm. Russell, the Ferrari boys, nail it. Lando and Max put the car in reverse.
It felt like Max was trying to stay out of harm's way. Like, it felt like a little bit of protection from him. It felt like Lando had a problem. Like, he made a mistake. But Max was like damage protection. It was almost like he's. Do you ever get a new car? And I've never had a new one, but I've had a lot of used ones new to me. And when I drive home the first time, I am like, first time I took my kids home from the hospital, I don't want anyone within 10 feet of me. Like, that's what Max was doing. He's like, I got baby on board in a new car. Just let me get out of the way. Let me just move to the
When
left and kind of hide.
when they did the onboard, he wheel spun the hell out of it. He had
did.
zero traction. He just screwed his start up. He just.
But then he
so
got out of the
everybody
way,
kind of
clearly. After that, he's like,
Then
I'm not getting tangled up in
100%.
this.
Yeah. I think once he realised that he was bogged down and he was going nowhere because it was all wheel spin and people were starting to fly all around him, he's like, yep, I'm just going to pull over here and just watch everything else happen. And the sand and lack of grip that Paul was just referring to really caught Lawson out. When you saw the onboard, it was I don't know if you have this as much in NFL, but like in football, when someone like gets injured when they go down and there is no player around them, so it wasn't a contact. You know they've done something really bad because I don't know, they've twisted their knee. Whatever they've done,
someone goes down.
You know it's bad. Someone goes down with no one around them. You know it's bad. When Lawson just spun out and there was no contact and there was nobody around him, it's like it's all on him because he just lost it in the middle of that corner and it just looked like out of nowhere he just suddenly was Bambi on ice and off he'd gone.
Well, and he's losing the rear and he goes to recover it and it just gets worse and turns into a tank slapper. And I'm watching this thing happen. And as this is occurring, I'm thinking someone had to have hit him. Someone must have tapped his rear tire, a rear wheel, or even hit his gearbox as they were bunched up. And then they show the onboard from someone behind him. Like, nope, that's all on him.
It was an absolute, and he's brand new to this. He's never driven this circuit in Formula 2, so chalk that one off to experience and get ready for Sunday. So safety car comes out for it. We get a restart. Fernando and Lando, which I like the fact that rhymes. These two went at it. They were, oh my gosh, it was spicy. And as these two are kind of tripping over each other and trying to take each other in some outside of the corner moves and all this kind of stuff, Ocon rocks up behind them and goes, I'm here for this. And he ends up taking Alonso. It was fantastic. And then George gets Piastri. And like we all thought, for the lead, but we all thought, because we probably should have backed all the way back up here, is that was a big split of strategy at the beginning of people on mediums versus softs. And the softs...
It was 19 laps.
I'm not going to use the phrase
how
Paul.
Are the softs not going to go 19 laps, people are thinking.
So, yeah, and I'd WhatsApp Paul and I said, how come, not everybody started on the softs? And I can't give you the phrase that he used to describe the softs, but he said after what we'd seen on Friday, the softs aren't really going to last properly beyond 2 or 3 laps because most of them were toast in qualifying. They were looking at these tyres and going, oh my gosh, they've done an out lap, a hot lap, and an in lap, and they're done. So it's like, well, is the same thing going to happen on the soft? And everyone's coming in on the radios, like to Piastri, saying it's going to come back to us. Don't worry about it. He's going to gobble you up now. Don't worry about it. What was maybe going to cause the problem was if you could extend the life of the
by having
softs by
400 safety cars.
Yeah. So Logan decided to join rookie buddy Lawson by crashing out. Spinning out. It wasn't a crash. Again, same kind of thing. Spun out and took a gravel trap visit. So we got another safety car.
Yep. And then we start seeing the softs start to die when they restart. And we see the mediums pushing through and getting stronger. Piastri takes the lead back. Can I say something real fast? This is the beginning of what made this weekend less than perfect for me. This part, the safety cars here. And I'm going to explain more in a little bit, but just put a pin in the idea that we had a sprint race filled 19 laps, almost half were safety car laps. And so I struggled with that, and there was a reason this happened. We'll revisit this. But I enjoyed this race. I enjoyed this weekend. I thought it was great because when it was green flag, it was great racing. It was great racing for every position on the grid.
I don't want to break steal my thunder from later, but I'm going to say I think I enjoyed the sprint more. So definitely under racing conditions. So we got the safety car cleared up, and like you say, they were all slicing through. Lando got Leclerc, and all of a sudden we now know that Max is world champion because Perez is out. He's sitting in the gravel trap. This was a 3-1 didn't go, wasn't it?
It was. And someone hit him. Who was it? Or was it him on him?
I'll tell you who it is now because this is where someone online posted another incorrect sandwich reference, and you know what we're like about sandwiches and naming it after the filling.
Yep.
But Hulk, it was a Hulk sandwich. Hulk was sitting there in the middle, minding his own business. Ocon left of him, Perez right. They both, I don't know if they both closed the door, but essentially Hulk had nowhere to go. And it 3-1 doesn't go. And who did we lose? Not all 3 of them were out, right?
No,
2 of them in the
Ocon
gravel trap. Was it
Perez? I think were the 2 that ended up in the gravel trap, if I remember. And that's not on Checo. I mean, he was on the outside around Hulk. He was kind of just trying to stay on the track. If anything, it felt like Ocon was in the inside and kind of moved his way into Hulk, not knowing Hulk had nowhere to go, but who really knows? George wanted to pit. This is my favorite part of the sprint. He goes, might be worth a box. Time to box? And they're like, you'd come out in last and not make up any spots. Just live with the soft tires. It is what it is at this point. I can't tell if I love George on the radio telling the team what to do or not, because he does it a lot. So I just can't tell.
He does. And I know I've got a little note about that later when we get into the race. But yeah, so I mean, George gets taken by Max. There's now 4 laps to hunt Oscar down. And I thought Oscar did an absolute stellar job of really not having that time delta eaten into at all, really.
How did he do that? It was like 2 seconds and he held it, or whatever, 4 seconds. He held it basically the same for the last handful of laps.
Yeah,
and it's not like Max wasn't trying. I mean,
and behind him, behind him, Lando's absolutely on a flyer with the mediums now, gobbling up everybody. He gets Leclerc, and 3 corners later, he got Sainz. It was just like boom, boom, boom. I'll have you. You're next. Hamilton was on the charge as well. Norris was up into 3rd, and Hamilton got Sainz. Like, I don't even think we saw it on TV. I just saw the positions change on the graphic on the left-hand side. It must have been at the last corner almost that he got Sainz, but Oscar held Max off, got the win. I'm really split on this, what happened next. Part of me really loves the fact that Max won the championship on the Saturday.
Yeah.
Because there's no podium ceremony, they could go all in on the world champion thing, which we've never really seen before. Kind of all the world champion, neon lights going up. It's all focused on Max. It's fantastic. So actually, from a world champion perspective, I was really pleased he won it on the Saturday because it didn't distract from the podium celebration. I did feel a little bit sorry for Oscar, who's just gone and landed his first win ever. Well, not race win, not Grand Prix win. And they're kind of like, yeah, we'll be there in a minute. We're just talking to the world champion.
Not only that, so when they come across, Oscar, cuts to his right, camera left, to kind of go near the guys hanging. Well, they're not really hanging out anymore, but they got their arms through the fence. And they're cheering him on, and Max comes in right behind him. And his guys are through the fence too. And exactly like you say, here I feel bad for Oscar because he won his first thing, but there are 2 like sort of asterisks attached to it. 1, it wasn't a real Grand Prix, and 2, it was when Max became a 3-time champion, so everyone focused on that first. And it's like, I know. How much can you overshadow someone's first win in a thing? I can't even, like a sprint, like it's a separate thing. But no, I thought it was great.
Had it been a Grand Prix, it would have been a podium celebration. They wouldn't have been able to track from Oscar because they don't do that. And this is my other little bugbear that me and you have spoken about. Every other sport that I've followed, and new ones that I've started following since I've moved to the US, whatever major trophy they have, when somebody wins it, they give it to them. And there is a big euphoric moment where, it's Djokovic winning the US Open, it's someone winning the Super Bowl, it's someone winning the Premier League, whatever it is, or the World Cup. They give them the trophy there and then. Max won't see that World Drivers' Championship until the stupid little black tie event that they hold at the end of the season, and I just don't get it. If there's anything that I think Liberty are going to fix eventually, it's going to have to be to have a presentation of the trophy. You've just won the World Drivers' Championship, but we're not going to give you the trophy for about 6 months yet because we want to do it in some poncy little dinner event. It annoys me. It just does. That's a Rob's rant. There we go.
All right. Well, while we're finishing up the Rob's rant, I thought we both agreed it was a great sprint race, although I didn't like the proportion that was under the safety car, but it is what it is. We're going to do a quick few SAP stats before we get into Paul's thing, and I'm going to actually do a Paul-type approach. We're going to introduce the music now, even though I'll have more later. So we're using this one because it was a blast to the past with all these pit stops. Qatar GP edition, but the Saturday version starting us off. So Max, 3-time champion. I don't have a lot here, but we have to highlight this. We cannot let this go without some celebration. Max is a 3-time champion 3 times in a row, and he won this on a Saturday. The last driver to win on a Saturday was his girlfriend's dad, Nelson Piquet. He also a 3-time champion, won all of his on Saturdays. Max obviously had won on Sundays before this, but Nelson's were not in a row. So, one on a Saturday. Last time to do it was his girlfriend's dad, and he is the 5th 3 in a row, or as we call them in basketball, the three-peat. He's the 5th three-peat champion ever. Rob, can you name the other 4?
Yes, I can, because I posted our image to celebrate this on Instagram.
Oh, so I didn't know you'd done that. Darn it.
So I'm going to say, is it possibly Hamilton, Schumacher, Vettel, and Fangio by any outside stretch? If I just shoot for 4 random other drivers out there.
So let's hear from Paul with the with this Saturday. You nailed it. So just a few stats, but I mean, before we play Paul, amazing, right, for Max? I mean, I don't want to. We're almost glossing over his greatness this season because it's become so routine to watch him dominate. I don't want to gloss over the fact that he won his 3rd title, and all of these haters get in my mind, and I can't stand it. They say 2021 was stolen, 2022 cost cap. What you got for 23? Because there is no way you can't count this as one of the most dominating championships I've ever seen, and he's a legitimate 3-time champ. I'm excited for him. I think he's great.
I got to confess, Brian, I snapped on Saturday. I got angry at all of this. I'm not a Max fan, but I'm also not anti-Max. I love watching a good driver do well. So there was, I think it was Spanners from Missed Apex put out like a note to congratulate Max, and the nasty comments in there of like, how can you call him a 3-time champion? Well, do you know why they can call him a 3-time champion? Because he is.
Yes,
and
he is.
And it's just like everyone's, oh yeah, but he stole his first championship. No, he didn't. If you want to, don't rewrite history. If you want to say, well, did he win it in dubious conditions? Yes. Did he do anything wrong that day? No. He overtook Lewis and won a race and won the championship. So stop saying that Max stole the first championship, because he didn't. Fine. Last year, they broke the cost cap by 400 grand, which I think somebody said is the cost of one new front wing. Are you saying that one front wing last year
was the reason he dominated the whole way through the year?
Oh my gosh, it's just like, I honestly believe, and this is where I almost have to kind of go against my own home nation, is that a lot of this comes, I think, from Lewis fans
Team
who
LH.
got so used to watching him win, and he was brilliant, Lewis. In fact, he still is, and I'm not saying that he's won his last Grand Prix. That Merc is looking good, and maybe if they keep developing, gives him a shot at more race wins next year. But just don't seem to be able to hack Red Bull doing it. So it all just piles in. It's the same in any sport. Everyone hates the people that are dominating. But it just drove me nuts on Saturday. And I think I quote tweeted Spanner's tweet and went, the responses to this tweet are just doing my nut in, because he is a 3-time world champion. And I do like the fact that this year has almost been so in your face, I won it. Like you just said, try and find something you're going to take it away from me this year. Anyway, I've got to calm down now. Let's listen to Paul.
do. I didn't have it in the notes that we were going rant, stats, rant. But okay, and we'll move back to some more from Paul on Saturday.
Hey, now times 2. So I won't lie to you. It's 3:00 in the morning, Sunday morning, race day. I might have had a couple of beers. I might have had a glass of wine, but 3:00 in the morning might sound late. It's actually not that late here. Bearing in mind, in 13 hours' time, I have to be at work. So, it's not too bad. It's the challenging thing with night races or late races where, to the general public, you seem like an absolute madman when you get up at 2 in the morning and start saying good morning to everyone. That's terribly British. Or, G-Day if you're Australian, or if you're from New York, like, get out of here. That's a terrible accent. I'm just offended all of you Americans. So what happened today? We had the sprint shootout. We had the sprint race. It was sort of boring, wasn't it? Not a lot happened. I'd actually like to see a race go ahead where there's maybe a couple of safety cars, some tyre issues, but we didn't have any of that today. It was just one car and a set of... My God, what a day. So it started with pretty much Pirelli...
I thought it was serious for a little bit there.
With this big tyre problem they had. We sort of got rumours of this last night. So much so they chucked a 10-minute practice earlier on, which, for track limits was good. I won't do a spoiler alert, but looking ahead, a few of the drivers clearly didn't practice hard enough. A lot of reports came out about Lance Stroll having a bit of a hissy fit. I might have touched on this last night, actually. I can't remember that. I think I did. Ignore that. It is late. But, yeah, sprint race.
How many beers?
I love that boy. He's one of my real good mates in this sport, and I really like the kid. And so to see him do well... In any, he's just been a star this year. Look, the other side, Logan. I don't know what's going on. Logan again, real good friend of mine. I love Logan. He's such a lovely boy, and like, I genuinely, there's a lot of talent there. I just don't know what's going on. You have to bear in mind that the track is so slippery, and the medium tire to get up to temperature is ridiculously hard. So you saw Lawson and Logan throw it off. It is an experience. I think you can't say any more than that, but you're sort of forgiven. The track is horrendous here. It's so slippy. There's no support races. I think I mentioned that again on my one last night, which is sort of like earlier than this. So the track can't really get rubbered in that well. That's why you're seeing, like in qualifying, in any race, it just keeps getting faster and faster. There's more layers of rubber added. And obviously it's windy, so it just gets covered by a layer of sand overnight. Like, it couldn't be any more against us. It's pretty rough. But yeah, listen, we're going to go into tomorrow. I'm actually excited. And I actually have to apologise ahead of tomorrow, because if I'm miserable tomorrow, it's gone badly. But I have been a little bit down on the last few reviews. Probably not my usual jovial self. But you know what? We travel the world and we go and do the sport. And we spend life away from home, away from families, away from friends. And when it isn't going well, like it hasn't been, especially for us with Valtteri, and that's my job. You have to remember that my job, amazingly, isn't to report for this podcast. Brian and Robbie yet to offer me a substantial paycheck. I want that noted. But no, so sometimes when I'm down, it isn't just because I'm miserable. It's just literally, this sport is so tiring, it's draining. And this weekend, we've actually got something a little bit to be encouraged about and shout about. So I'm obviously a little bit more excited. Sprint race is fantastic. Amazing for Oscar. Amazing for Max. 3-time world champion. People say he's 2-time world champion. Grow up. It wasn't his fault. He won that championship legitimately in his own ability and with the team that he had. You may think differently. But the kid is a 3-time world champion. And deservedly so this year. He's been phenomenal. As for the rest of us, we go into tomorrow. We hope there's not that many safety cars. And then, if you've questioned the Ocon crash earlier on, look, do you know what? He doesn't know Perez is there. He's just trying to push. Hulkenberg a little bit wide so he can get the apex of the corner. And it's just got badly wrong. It's one of those situations. Buzzing for tomorrow, guys. I'll speak soon.
Awesome. So we haven't heard all of these, just for everyone's benefit. When we're laughing at some of the points, it's because we haven't heard it. But it is kind of good that we aligned on all of these pieces. And I'm excited to hear Paul's Saturday note, or I guess Sunday morning, about the excitement for Alfa Romeo, because we know what's coming, which is amazing.
So we moved on to today. And let's start off with a bit of a bummer, which the news broke that Carlos Sainz was withdrawing from the Grand Prix because fuel leak or something in the in the car. So that was kind of set me off anyway as a Ferrari fan, a little bit of a downer, because he's been driving so well recently.
It was a downer, and I actually realized there was another problem. Because I have Hulkenberg on my fantasy team, I thought to myself immediately, is there a chance Nico will line up in the wrong grid spot because of the empty spot and screw me out of 10 seconds of penalties? I said, what are the odds of that happening? 100%? Apparently so.
And you could tell on the replay when they showed it,
he's in there, he's like
his helmet cam. He's looking around and going, "Uh-oh!" It's like he knew from the moment he almost came to the complete standstill. It's like,
what's the equivalent of that? Like going the wrong way on the football field for a little bit and then realizing, hang on, that's the wrong goal.
Do you know what I think it is the equivalent of? I remember back at school when we first played basketball. Basketball, what's it called at the beginning? Is it a tip-off or something when you right
jump
start?
Ball. Jump ball.
Whatever it is right at the beginning. Don't you start off, the two players start on the opposite side of your field? So I remember, not field, whatever it's called, court.
You're nailing all of this.
I'm sure it's called a court, right?
The touchdown. Yep.
Yeah, hey now. And I remember a friend of mine won it, got the ball, dribbled directly towards the basket he was facing and scored a great
on
basket.
himself.
on himself because he won it and ran in the direction he was facing. So that's what Hulk did today. He must have been told a million times in his ears, right? Remember, science is out. Leave the bay in front of you empty. Leave it empty. He's coming around on the formation lap. They're going, yeah, just to be sure, leave it empty. I got it. Leave it empty. And then he rolls up. He's like, oh God.
I mean,
anyway,
that was so good. That was I would have killed for like the Larry David sound. Womp, 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 but we need a video.
I would have killed to see Gunther's reaction as they kind of all dawned on them that that's got to be
like
on
a
Netflix.
bunch of effing wankers.
That's got to be on Drive to Survive this year. But anyway, so lights out and away we go, and they're all everywhere. There's carnage at the beginning, and all of a sudden, Lewis is spinning off into the gravel, and one of his wheels is going in the opposite direction. It's like, what the hell happened there? Oh dear. Oh dear, dear, dear. It's the Mercs coming together as we watch the replay. It wasn't good, was it, on Lewis there? He tried to make out on his original radio, I think, as all drivers do. What's he doing? What's he doing? What's he doing? But, hours later,
he said later, it was likely on me, likely on you. So when we talked about the sprint race and Paul mentioned it too, Esteban didn't know that it's the two other cars there, and he didn't really do anything wrong. We all kind of said he started the chain reaction, but it wasn't like on him. There was no penalty.
Yep.
It was one of those things, a racing incident, 3-1 do not work. This case, Lewis closed the door on George. I don't know what he expected George to do, even if there weren't cars inside of George. He really closed the door on George.
And he wasn't on the outside limits of the track either. He had plenty of room to carry on going around the outside of that turn. It's like he could have gone sideways around there and still made it, right? He could have drifted. And,
I think he said something like, George hit my rear wheel or something. No, you closed in on George and ran over his front wheel with your rear wheel is what you did. I mean, that was 100% on Lewis. And he admitted it afterwards, but
he did.
George real hot under the collar. George wouldn't stop ranting on the radio. They had to call the boss in. They called the boss up in Austria. Hey, we need you to get on the radio. We've got a guy losing his mind in the car. And apparently they must have, I'm assuming what they did was they took a cell phone and a headset and turned one upside down and said, talk now. That's how technology works.
Then out of nowhere, Piastri is up into second. And I'm like, how did this happen? I get that the two Mercs came together. And when they showed the onboard of Piastri, no, it wasn't of Piastri, it was whoever it was, like all right behind all of this.
Yeah.
And you see the Mercs come together, and Alonso looks at that and went, oh, I better get out of this. And he jinks over to the left. When he jinks over to the left, who does he completely shut down? I'm not quite sure who it was that was coming up on the left-hand side that probably had Piastri, but whoever he moved in front of, he basically put the handbrake on and stopped both of those. It might have been. And Piastri's like, don't mind if I do.
Exactly. He never left off. Piastri's just like, all right, this opened beautifully. It was like the seas had parted. And he comes flying down the right, and we end up with Max, and then we had Oscar relatively close behind him, and of course, safety car called. But at that point, it set something up for Oscar to really have kind of a fun race. And it set up what I thought was a pretty fun race overall. But we haven't really talked about the tires. Can we take a quick detour? Because now we got through lap one. Can we talk a little bit about the tires here? So this was the second part that kind of ruined this for me. Like the safety cars in the sprint were frustrating. That the track had so little grip. And between the wind and the sand on a non-grip track, we had people going off left and right, and they clear them pretty fast. Kudos to Qatar. They get them out of the gravel real fast, but it's a couple laps of 2-3 laps of safety car running. It really ruined what was an amazing set of battles. Maybe it helped facilitate the battles, but regardless, not a lot of green flag racing in the sprint. And then we had this whole kerfuffle about the tires. You can only go 18 laps on the tires. And nobody knew exactly what that would mean, who had what tires, how far they could go, when they'd have to pit. And I thought there was a lot of great battling this whole race on the track. The end, not as much, but for the first half, until we all got everyone on their last set of tires, and I do have one question about that one, I didn't enjoy it as much as I would because I had no idea who was battling who or whom and where, because everyone was on a 14 pit stop approach, and you didn't know who'd pitted how many times. The boards weren't updated. They came out on tires. Are those new? Are those old? How many laps do they have left in that one? We don't know. Well,
Yeah, well, no, actually, I think we did know, and this is what ruined it for me, is that
Only if
I've
they were
always
new,
been
they had 18.
I've always been no, they did. They kept putting a graphic up saying this driver must pit by lap blah 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 because they've only got 16 laps left on this. And this was the big problem for me. Is okay, I get it from safety concerns. They mandate they're going to have to make this many 3 pit stops. Okay, great. Because of the way it was mandated, this didn't become like me and you both moaned about one stoppers and we think they're boring and we'd love to have more pit stops so we can get more strategy. There was no strategy here.
None.
Because there was almost like this pre-printed sheet that all the teams could look at because everybody knew how many tire allocations everybody got left. In fact, we published one on Twitter, I think, like to say, here it is. Here's what everyone's got left to go on to Sunday. And here's how many are new. And okay, you might not have known how many laps USETs had done. Yes, based on just looking back over the weekend. So basically, everybody's strategy was published to everybody else to say, you're going to have to stop on 19, you're going to have to stop on 34, and then you're going to have to stop on, whatever it was, 42 or something. So there was zero strategy.
Right.
So it was a really confusing race to watch because we didn't know like who was really in position, who was out of position, and where they would all shake out come the end. I didn't think there was that many track battles, actually. We didn't see that much overtaking. We only really saw overtaking by cars that almost jumped out of the way of each other because they knew they weren't racing each other at that point on time. There was one point where Yuki just got out of the way, or maybe Zhou got out of the way because like, I'm not battling you right now. I'm at the end of a stint on these tyres and you're probably on fresh ones. So I'm just going to let you by because there's no point battling you because they couldn't risk pushing the tyre. Well, I don't know what they couldn't risk. I mean, Piastri said it was almost like 3 sprint races stuck together because you just went as hard as you could because you knew you already had a predetermined endpoint for your tyres. So I didn't enjoy it. I just didn't.
I mean, I disagree a little bit. I thought there were some battles. I enjoyed some of the battles for most of the positions that occurred. And even when I thought there were some people battling even out of position, not a lot, but enough. It was hard to follow, and I agree 100% though with your point on the strategy. Like that's what I always enjoy, and this sort of predetermined thing. Someone said it great to Naomi. I think it might have been on. Like, well, it disadvantaged everybody the same. Exactly. So everyone was kind of like given the same rubric for how to tackle this thing instead of letting people build their own. Right? It wasn't to choose your own adventure. It was here you have to run like this. And I think we both would agree we want driver safety. You don't want a tire delaminating, exploding.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and you go fly. So that's fine. I'm fine with what they had to do and being safe. But it just, like, I enjoyed the weekend, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought. And we'll close it. We'll keep going to the end here and close it.
Yeah, we'll keep going through the race. I mean,
it was entertaining. I just don't know if it was great racing.
I'm not, and I'm going to put a little bit of an asterisk next to this because there is a chance that because my other sporting passion at the exact same time here, the Arsenal game finished.
Stuff in the beginning.
It wasn't. I had it on my phone. I was watching the F1 on my phone. I had Arsenal on the TV, and Arsenal ended a run of like 6 or 7 years of never beating Manchester City. So it was a big thing. So potentially I was spent at the final whistle. All my adrenaline, all my emotion was gone, and then I kind of flicked back the F1 on the big screen to carry on watching it. And I thought, I'm just watching a predetermined set of pit stops.
Yeah, you're a little
the
more
most
down
exciting
on it
thing. And the most exciting thing I'm really worrying about is how many track limit penalties we're going to rack up over it. When you're talking more about, yeah, they did. Yeah.
And you're this down. This is your third Rob's rant, and you're
talking about this race.
Won.
I'm just like, oh yeah. I mean, if we were doing a podcast about the Arsenal game, I'd tell you what, I'd be hanging off the ceiling right now. But I just felt that the sprint seemed to have more real battles for position because there are no pit stops, so everyone's technically in position.
Interesting.
Whereas because this was so mixed up, I just felt we got. I don't know. I can't put my finger on why I didn't enjoy the race. There was just kind of nothing in it, really. But anyway, let's keep going. I
found it entertaining. But anyway, what was interesting to me is Russell and Checo were in alignment on lap 10. And there's not a ton of stuff. So I just want to dig in on this one for a second. They were in alignment, I think at 13-14 or 12-13. And Russell then goes to quickly pass Joe, and then quickly past Logan. And after 2 or 3 laps, Checo is still behind both Joe and Logan. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on here? Why aren't the two of them moving through the field in the same fashion? I know the Merc was looking good this weekend, but better than the Red Bull by that much? Why doesn't Checo just glue himself to the back of George's gearbox and follow him through a lap later. George Karun made a joke. He's like, we're going to name turn 6 the George Russell corner, because he was doing an overtake we hadn't really seen a lot that weekend, and he kept doing it over and over again, and it was successful.
He did. Yep.
He would kind of dive to the inside early, brake late, and take the corner, and it worked. The tires stuck. The car stuck. It was awesome. So anyway, we had some battles also going on. Leclerc came out of the pits ahead of Alonso, and everyone wanted to see that. Instead, we watched Oscar trundling along by himself. And I'm literally doing this for the YouTubers. I'm like ducking down to try to see the screen because I can see the two cars and I can't tell what's happening. I'm trying to look under, and it didn't work. Turns out you only get what's on the screen, so we didn't see it. But this was also the last thing I'd say that kind of I struggled with, and I mentioned this briefly. I didn't know who was battling who. Like, it was intriguing but confusing because, if you look, what's really happening is in 40 laps, we're going to have two guys close to each other, but right now they're 12 places apart. I'm like, I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I can't keep track of that.
I think that's what kind of did it for me as well. It's like not really knowing what I was watching. It's like, am I excited about Bottas looking like he's sitting in the points at the moment, or is he gonna? Is he a pit stop ahead?
Exactly, or is he gonna have to stop on the last lap and then lose all the spots?
They didn't put the pit stop graphic up enough, I don't think, because that made it really hard to try to work out where the hell everybody was. And then, kind of as we sort of hit the middle of the race, kind of anywhere from lap 25 onwards, we just started seeing the penalties for track limits.
Checo got the first.
Up.
Checo's like, you know what? I'm having a bad weekend so far. Started from the pit lane, crashed out in sprint. Why don't I get the first one of these things started? And it won't be the last.
Oh, he got multiple of them. And the damning thing for him is that Max was one of the only guys, I think, who didn't get a single one. So, same car.
That's the only damning thing. His race engineer has to come on and go, could you stop doing that, please?
I know. That was like, you might be going a little bit faster through the corners by doing that, but not 5 seconds worth of faster.
How great was it when Fernando went off the track in turn 2, takes the escape road, and then decides, you know what, I'm rejoining at full speed, not even looking if anyone's there. I'm like, oh my God.
That could have been awful. That could have been absolutely, like, a couple seconds later, and he just would have just sideswiped. It would have been like
a T-bone. He would have went straight in. Him and Leclerc would have went off. It was bad. More penalties.
It's because he had a hot bum, and he hadn't had his bum cooled down in the pit stop.
At first, I thought that was a joke, and I felt bad for him. Like something was broken, and it was hot in there. Like meaning, like something that would vent a different way wasn't. And sometimes that happens. It sounds like I didn't realize how friggin' hot it was till we talk about Logan here in about a minute. We had Alex and Yuki battling a ton. I loved this. They went after each other like 3 different times, and it was entertaining. And then at this point, we heard the sergeant note. And they didn't explain the beginning, and they basically said, box to retire. He said, no, I'm staying out. And Vowles says, it's up to you. And Logan goes, I'm good. You can trust me. I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Like, was something wrong with the car? And he's like, I can nurse it around. And Logan's fighting for a seat. So I'm like thinking to myself, is he trying to be a hero here? And I didn't know he was physically ill until they kind of reported that a little later. And then you felt terrible for him as he reports back, it's getting worse. I need to box. And he's going like 5 miles an hour on the side of the track. And I'm thinking, is he throwing up in his helmet? Like,
that's what I was. They'd already said that, hadn't they? That he thought he was about to. And I was like, oh my God, can you imagine? Bad enough in there with the extreme heat. I mean, well, I was going to say we get to it later. We might as well get to it now. Amount of drivers opening their visors to try and get some air in. George driving down the straight
with his wrists
hands up, trying to get some air on his hands and open his visor and just get like any type of cooling down. I mean, that was an insane physical effort to get those cars around there. And if imagine throwing up inside a racing helmet while you're trying to do 200 miles an hour, I can imagine that could not end well. So I felt so bad for him. I mean, it's like you say, he's fighting for his seat anyway, and he was retired yet again. But I don't think anybody, when you saw him sort of sitting on the side of his car, it reminded me remember when Hamilton couldn't get out of the car at Baku because of his bad back? Yeah. Like Logan just looked spent, just trying to get out of that car.
Even the podium drivers were the only ones we saw a lot at the end of the race. Every one of them was sitting on the podium or around Max's car, waiting for their interview. Except Lando, who wanted to show off and look at me, I'm so strong, I can walk around. And then in the cool-down room, Oscar was laying down, pouring water on himself. And he's a young, fit guy. So, I mean, anyway.
So then we got to the point where I actually started to enjoy it a bit more just because once we got to the magical lap 39, now we knew these were probably the tyres everybody.
Except
Or
Max.
if he did have to do, because he had to do one more stop. Yeah,
Did he?
Yeah, he did. When they put the display up, there was only 2 left to go. I think Zhou was the last one, wasn't he? That did his
didn't know
final
that.
stop. But they put the graphic up where they showed how many stops everybody had done. And because I was getting overexcited about where Zhou was, and then when Zhou then they said he's got to box one more time, I was like, oh, there's Valtteri as well. Are they both going to drop out of the points? But they put the graphic up on the side, and Bottas had done his 3. I'm like, oh, he's legitimate. Now, for the first time, I can legitimately get excited that Valtteri was sitting in 8th because I really didn't know whether I should or I shouldn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then. But while it was good that I knew where everyone was, we didn't get a whole lot of action then for that last stint because
George
now
came
everybody
out in
is
the
just
softs,
trying to.
couldn't go anywhere with him. It was too late.
Let's talk about that for let's talk about that for a second, right? So Paul had sent the note saying the softs looked toast after 3 laps in quali. Everybody talked about how quickly the softs had fallen off. The sprint race had shown how quickly the softs would fall off. George's softs fell off. What do we have? 9 racing laps in the sprint, and Piastri took him back again. So they'd lasted what, 4, 5 before they'd probably started falling off. Did they not have any more mediums? You didn't have to run all the compounds, right? So he'd been on the hards.
Had he done hards?
He'd been on hard.
Okay.
He'd been on hards at least. So putting softs on, I think, with either 7 or 8 laps left to go, and they're all going, oh, now George is going to go on a charge. I'm like, well, not unless he's got some magical new soft tyre that's actually going to last. It looks like he'll be on a charge for 3 or 4 laps, and then he's going to be in the danger zone of they're just going to fall away, and that's really exactly what happened. Yeah. At one point, it looked like he was going to fall into the clutches of, was it Leclerc who was catching him behind?
Yep.
But that didn't transpire to anything either. So we had a lot of threatening to evolve into something. Max teased us all, I think, by nursing his car back, and we were like, oh, actually, we can actually see Max and Oscar in the same shot here down the straight. There's only like 3.9 seconds in this. Can Oscar make a charge? No, he couldn't.
No. Lando had been told to hold position, which was curious because it was 10 laps before the end. I'm like, you're not going to let him go at 10 laps, a lot of time to tell someone to hold position. Understanding, given the jeopardy of the tires and the slickness of the track and making the tires last to the end, and you don't want George coming back on magical softs, which didn't exist, to bring him back into it. K-Mag was given the very unhappy news that he had to go to Bravo 10 position 4, and he freaked out. And I'm thinking, yeah, no one wants to go to Bravo 10 position 4. And just like Crofty, I had no idea what that meant. Still don't know. If anyone finds that out, send us a tweet.
We have to give we got to give a quick award to Gasly for the season's worst handing back of a position ever.
You almost had to do it twice.
Oh my god!
He took someone else later after that, but yeah, he gave the position.
He took Alonso,
back.
didn't he? Was it Alonso he took?
I think so.
He took somebody around the outside of the track,
Alonso.
and all 4 wheels were off the track as he was pulling off the maneuver. So it was like, well, he's going to have to give it back, and he had ample time to give that back before Checo rocked up on the scene
and just drove.
At which point,
at
which point he went. Actually, probably now's a good time to give it back. So there you go, Alonso. Oh, what's that other car doing? And Checo just kind of came storming past. It was like, worst ever handback of a position ever. Well done, Gas man.
Kudos to Max. A big weekend for McLaren, and to both drivers on the race podium. Points for Valtteri and Zhou. We'll talk about that in the SAP stats. I still feel like it was entertaining, but I don't know if it was great racing. So I enjoyed it, I guess, ? Like, that's kind of the way I was thinking about it. I don't know, Rob, what about you?
Yeah, I still think I probably enjoyed the sprint race more for what racing laps we had because of the safety cars, because it was always for position. This one I think I'm just going to say that confusion is what ruined it today for me. So pre-prescribed strategy, i.e. there wasn't any, because everybody knew when everybody else was going to box. There was no faking someone out in the pit lane that you're going to box, because no, you're going to have to, otherwise you're going to get black flagged if you go past this tyre length. So I didn't like that part. And yeah, maybe the confusion of it. But, overall, actually putting it together as a package, the race weekend was great. I enjoyed quali. I enjoyed the sprint, and I kind of found some pieces to cheer for today. Like you said, both the Alphas in the points was great. Max was great. The double podium from the McLaren boys again is just such a good news story. So cool. I'm smiling about that. So I can smile and enjoy the result, even if I didn't massively enjoy how we got there, if that makes any sense.
It does, but let's do our king of the pits and the pits before we hear the final Pitlane Paul dispatch, and we actually have some music. This is from Andy. Yes, Rob?
Oh yeah, the legend that is our resident musician Andy, that has done so much for us, has come up with 2 jingles for King of the Pits and The Pits. So we're doing
let's
King of the Pits first.
Oh yeah, we're going to start on a high note and end on the downer because.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're the king of the pit.
Wait for the blinker.
He said he left that in on purpose.
I love it.
I
love it. I wait for the blinker. You go first on your King of the Pit.
I'm torn on this one because part of me says can't not give it to Max because he's a 3-time back-to-back
3-time in a row
champion, and that's absolutely phenomenal. However, I am going to give it to Mr. Piastri.
Yeah.
I thought he was great all week. McLaren, I really should give it to McLaren, actually, because we were okay to give it to constructors.
So you've gone to a third now. It wasn't Max, and it's not Oscar, it's now McLaren.
No, I said I could make a case.
You're going to give it to Zach Brown?
No.
I'm
going to give it to Piastri.
Okay.
Piastri, because I just think it was a brilliantly executed race weekend from him. Yes, he got a little bit fortunate with the Mercedes deciding they weren't going to take too much part today after the first corner. But yeah, giving it to Piastri. What about you?
I want to give it to Piastri. I want to give it to George for his recovery drive. I want to give it to Lando. I'm not giving it to any of them. I'm going to give Max. I know I'm not the biggest Max fan in the world, right? I've admitted that, but I have always respected and admired his greatness and his drive and his motivation. And 3 championships in a row, the 5th person to ever do that in the history of F1. He's my King of the Pits, without a doubt. He is just in a league of his own, and we're seeing greatness that we should be of. And so I am, and I know you are too, but so I'm going to represent that with naming him my King of the Pits. And our pits, we have music for that too, Andy. And I spent that whole 30 seconds soliloquy on Max trying to figure out how to give this to 2 people. I haven't figured it out yet.
You're the pits.
I'll go first on this one, and I'm going to take the heat for giving it a double. But in order to make it a single, I'm giving it to Racing Point, circa 2019. Because the drivers for Racing Point, I may have the year wrong, but I think I got it right, were Lance and Checo. And those are my pits. So in order to do this jointly...
Who's the pits? Come on.
Yeah, Racing Point, 2019, the driver lineup.
No, not a chance.
Yep.
You gave me beef for saying
I'm one of the co-hosts of this podcast, and I therefore say I've jointly made it work together. Yeah, man, bad. Lance is getting worse on a regular basis. He's quickly becoming the next Latifi, and I don't just mean because he's Canadian. It's not there yet, but it ain't good. The delta between him and Fernando on everything, from quali and everywhere else, is humongous, and he's making errors left and right, and he's acting petulant when people ask him about it. So that would be my argument there. And Checo, I'm sorry, man. Where did he finish today? Like, I'll pull up the standings. Checo finished today... I'm scrolling. He was 10th. He brought home a point, a single friggin' point in that Red Bull that Max dominated in with all weekend, all season. 1 point. It feels like Bob Uecker in Major League. He's like, 1 stinking point? That's all we got? 1 hit? 1 goddamn hit? Pardon my language. And so to me, I'd give it to both of them. And that's why I'm going back to when they were teammates.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit random, but okay, we'll let it slide. Do you know, up until the point where mid-race where he tweeted out to say that he admitted it was his fault, then Lewis was actually leading my pits, because it's like, come on, dude, you're 7-time world champion. At least have the humility to admit when it was your own error, which he did. So now I can't hold him accountable for that. So then it falls down to... I don't want to do it. We did this last week when we sort of tried to make out that we've been hard on him and trying to work out if we shouldn't be hard on him and blah, 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 blah. But it's Checo. I just don't get it. I don't get the delta. I finished 1 minute 20 behind Max. 1 minute 20, like you say, with the solitary point in the same car, where the same width as Max's car, but Max was able to keep all 4 wheels on inside the limits repeatedly.
120. That's almost a whole lap. He was.
Yeah, he almost got lapped. He's the. If I look down the results here,
Fourth
Stroll,
car from-
Gasly, and Albon were the other ones that just stayed on the lead lap, and then you get Magnussen, and the rest got lapped. So almost got lapped by his teammate in the same machinery, which. Oh man, I wanted us to be able to come on this week, right, and go,
Yeah.
hey, we kind of gave it a little bit of hard time to Checo. We were kind of bigging up his career pre-Red Bull. We were showing how he is kind of on an upward trajectory, and if he can get second in the championship this year, then he's had a good year as a number 2. But really, he's not maximising what he's got at the moment, and today he really didn't maximise. But shock horror. I'm busting your chops and wanting to give it to 2.
Lance, you go with the same guys?
I want the same, because that petulant outburst when he didn't make it through, and the whole kind of just I wanted to slap him, that face when the interviewer. She's got a job to do. She's just rocking up and asking him, and he's just like meh, like get out of here. So
you agree with me? Racing Point.
I'm going to give it to
2019.
Racing Point 2019.
I think I got the year right because 21 Checo was at Red Bull already, and there were a couple years together there, so I think I got that right. In 19. Well, let's hear what Paul had to say in the third installment of our sprint race weekend. Pitlane Paul reporting from Qatar.
With music.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, come on, Brian.
What? Nope, I nailed it. Here we go. They got so many buttons to press, I thought I was going to throw open my helmet.
Well, that's the race. Where to start on that one? Listen, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good race. I thought it was excellent. I woke up this morning. I actually had a bit of a headache, and then I realised I recorded the Saturday episode of this. So maybe it's a thing for sprint races in the future, where I do a Saturday night, post-Saturday night version, where I might have a couple of drinky poos, because that's what you do, you got to enjoy it. So yeah, going on to the race, I had a little bit of a headache, and I was sort of like, I had a bit of a headache watching the race. It was a good race, lots of overtaking, but I don't know if it was just me. And bear in mind, I'm here. I actually hadn't got a clue what was going on as such during the race, position-wise. Like nothing was making sense, if you understand what I'm saying. So obviously everyone's on different strategies, but everyone's sort of got to do the sort of same strategy to a degree. So it was a little bit like, I don't really. Basically, it was pretty awkward to follow, and you were just sort of waiting for the last round of pit stops. So once everyone had done 3 stops, you could then sort of figure out where people were. But I don't think I'd like that every single week. I won't lie, I was sort of quite excited by it. A bit of a, it made it a little bit spicy, a little bit interesting. But in honesty, yeah, that's a little bit where I am. I was a bit, I don't know what is happening, but look, take nothing away, it was a good race. It was entertaining. I said to Rob at the start of the week on the message, actually, that there's not a great deal of overtaking here. The last section's so high speed, where the only real overtaking point is turn 1, which you did see a lot of, most overtakes, to be fair, were turn 1, around the outside, so on and so forth. They actually managed more overtakes than I thought they would during the race, so I was wrong. That's fair. It doesn't happen that often. Normally after I've had a night out on a few beers. So all in all, what a race. The one thing I will say, that was borderline dangerous for the drivers. I can't go too much into what's happened post-race, but things aren't good right now as I speak. It was too hot, it's too humid. And as you saw from Logan, he was just absolutely destroyed. He wasn't the only one, I can assure you. If anyone is sat down and thought that he's wimped out, he made the right decision. There are some very, very, very poorly drivers right now. And I think it's something that probably does want reviewing moving forward, because it isn't safe. And at the end of the day, the speed these guys are going, the stress they're putting their bodies through, and it's probably very easy to maybe have a little bit of a blackout when you're that exhausted. Your natural thing is to keep going, so we have to keep a massive sense of reality, and I think that today was as on the edge as you can get. And if you bear in mind that Singapore is obviously normally the hot, the real hot, spicy, horrendous race. This one was so much worse. No one expected it to be, which I think was also a factor. But yeah, I'll finish this one. I just hope all the guys are okay, and yeah, I'm sure they will be. Get a lot of fluids into them, not alcoholic. That would be my job in a few hours' time at Qatar Airport, or Doha Airport as I should say. But yeah, that was borderline today, and it's probably something that needs to be looked at. On the whole, great weekend, fantastic for us. I know this one's dragged on to nearly probably 10 minutes, especially with me bumbling on last night. But great weekend for us. Valtteri just drove the socks off the car all weekend, and to have a spike in performance, I think, like I said, when you go for race after race, it's not going your way, and everything's really shit. That's the second swear word I've said in this, but it's just realistic. It does get you down because you do care, and so if any of my last ones have been pretty drab, I hope this one's spiced up a little bit. To any kids listening, drinking isn't the answer. I love you all, and I'll speak to you after Austin, Texas.
Paul.
Oh my gosh!
So
I just Googled.
You go ahead.
I just Googled it during there because he said he can't say too much about it. And I'd not seen this news. Like you say, we'd come to record so quickly afterwards. It's not naming them, but 3 drivers have been taken to the medical centre. It says Lance Stroll sought help from an ambulance after stopping after the race for dehydration. Esteban Ocon has done an interview that said during the race he was actually sick inside his crash helmet.
No way.
Yes, what it's saying. There's an interview here that he's Albon was taken to the medical centre to be treated for acute heat exposure. I mean, wow.
That is not a joke. I mean, in all seriousness, like when
crazy.
Temperatures get high anywhere in the world and people talk about it, it can do serious damage to your organs and things like that. Kind of heat exhaustion and heat exposure is not a laughing matter. And so we did not know that. We saw, as I said, Oscar laying on the ground, a young, fit guy who was just had nothing left. And so that is bad. Crofty did mention next year this is 6 weeks later in the calendar, so it should be a bit cooler. But that also needs to be addressed and make sure that it's not this hot again. So we learned something there. Thank you, Paul, for sharing that with us. And we also hope everybody is all right. We do have some SAP stats. Rob, you all right if we launch into them to kind of get it closed out here? I'm not reading
music.
No, we didn't.
No,
remember?
Oh,
the ringtone.
well, yeah,
we do it once.
I thought that was the sprint race SAP stats music.
No. So.
Oh.
Are we going to shut up if I play something? Fine.
Stats, Qatar edition.
You say it though.
Me say what?
You do the. All right, Qatar edition main race. Rob didn't want to say it. Here we go. So Max, and these are ones that I found myself and quickly came up with in the 10 minutes between. Max has 433 points at Checo's 224, and unlike Crofty, I can do math. That's 209 points ahead. He has now lapped the entire field except Checo with his 224. Lewis is in third with 194. So Max is now first and third in the Drivers' Championship. And Mercedes has 326 points total, second place in the Constructors' Championship. So Max is also in second place. First place in the Constructors' Championship, first and third in the Drivers'. It was his 14th win of the season, now that he's a 3-time champion. With 5 races remaining, he is just 1 victory shy of equaling his own record of 15 victories in a season set last year. We talked a little bit about Fernando's heated seat, but Russell did have a nice fine drive to take 4th ahead of Charles Leclerc and then Fernando. And then Esteban came home 7th for Alpine. And here's the exciting part for me. Alfa Romeo had their first double points finish of the season right behind that. In 8th and 9th, Valtteri, then Joe. And then the last point, as we already pointed out, was Checo. This move for Alfa Romeo puts them ahead of Haas for 8th in the constructor standings. And Karun would tell us, if he's got this accurate, that moving up 1 place to 8th was worth $10 million. So hell of a day for Alfa Romeo getting ahead of Haas. Good job, Valtteri. Good job, Joe. Perez made his point from starting in the pit lane because of the changes during the sprint race. I can't remember if he had 2 or 3 penalties, and I saw one source that said 3. So since that's more and more, larger number, I'm going to take 3. But here's my last stat, and this is a doozy, and this is why Rob and I both made the 2019 Racing Point our pits. After the Qatar quali, Fernando has more Q3 appearances, 17, than Lance and Checo combined this year with 16. Let that one settle in for a minute. Fernando Alonso himself, in an Aston Martin that's falling off a cliff it was fine this weekend, but before this had been a turd for the last few weeks, has 17 Q3 appearances. His teammate in the exact same car, Lance Stroll, and Checo, Max's teammate, in the greatest car we've seen in years, you add them together, and it's less than Fernando. So that is a hell of
that's
a
what
stat.
combined.
Yeah.
That's what combined means.
I'm just
Thanks,
doing it
Brian.
for emphasis. I want the right emphasis on the statistic. So
I think I also read somewhere, and I didn't grab the source, so I could have made this up. But I think if Lando didn't bother doing any more qualifying all season, I think Lando's won the head-to-head record with Checo for qualifying, out-qualifying Checo this year.
Lando against Checo?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
I'll double check it. As in, like,
How many times they've beaten their teammates?
yeah,
Or where they've made
no,
it?
teammates, head-to-head. You're kind of doing that kind of. Lando's out-qualified Checo so many times now that even if
Okay.
Checo out-qualifies
Got it,
Lando
got
for the
it,
rest
got
of
it.
the season, Lando will win.
I was
a
in the
McLaren
teammate
that
mind
was
space.
okay, right. In a McLaren that was a bag of bolts for the first part of the
Until
season.
Austria,
so,
it was a turd
exactly.
in and of itself.
Which again, we don't want to beat up on poor old Checo, but what he's just. Oh,
It's
I'm
not
not even
going
going back
well.
there.
It's
Let's
not
not go
going
back
well.
there. Let's not go back there.
Last thing I have for the weekend before I turn it to you is fantasy is still calculating as it likes to do for 12 or 13 hours. So my little beef, though, someone found this stat and I didn't validate it. But for the sprint day alone, just Saturday, Oscar got 10 points. He finished first. Alex Albon had 18 points. He finished 7th. I've said it all season. This overtaking and the double, the places made up and the overtaking is dumb. I saw on Twitter, I had kind of a long weekend and I wasn't around as much as I should have been. And I saw something that was a GIF of basically, who was it? Like when Checo had a bad start, they show Checo being sad. But then they show Checo's fantasy owners being happy because if you screw it up in quali, it just more chances to get points in the race. The lack of alignment of incentives there is hosed, and they need to fix that for next year. But that's my rant. That's a Zap rant on fantasy, and I'm done turning it to you, Mr. Vale.
Yeah, so that's it. There's no race preview to do. Next week we will do something as well as preview quota. Just one little plea, really. We don't really do this too much. We always kind of forget to do it. About follow us on, Instagram. I'm going to call it Twitter because I won't call it X and Facebook. But Instagram. If you do follow us on Instagram, please continue to follow us. If you don't, or you know somebody, you can just nudge and get them to follow us. My OCD has been kicking in really badly this week because for the past week, maybe 10 days, we have been stuck on 199 followers on Instagram. So
really.
Yeah.
Well, I'll follow us then.
Oh,
funny.
Bird.
Just
yeah,
kidding.
nice. Yeah. Actually, when I told my son that, I said, "Oh, we're stuck on 199." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Show me." So I went to show him. I said, "It's 198," and then he just smiled and showed me his phone because he'd unfollowed the dirty side. So anyway, told him he wasn't sleeping in the house if he didn't follow back again. So yeah, 199 we're stuck at. So it'd be great to go over 200, but yeah, that's it. So we'll find something to do next week, Brian.
And we had a couple 100 seconds of DRS lined up, and we had to cancel because I had some situations I had to deal with. I apologize to those folks. We will get those scheduled, recorded, and booked, and next week we should have that back.
Yeah, we did. And someone who I forgot to give a shout out to last week, and then I said I was going to give a shout out to this week, and then we're just about to wrap up, and I've completely forgotten, is there is a bar near us called J. Timothy's.
Yes.
Yes. And they've been great follow. They followed us on Twitter. We've had lots of interactions. It's been great. And I kind of reached out to say, well, I know you're the name J. Timothy's, but who is it that runs the account? I found out it's a nice lady called Nikki. And I went down and I when I met her a week before last. We shared a couple of beers, had a great chat about F1. I think I've twisted her arm to come on DRS
Nice.
as well. So that'll be another one to add to the pile. So, Nikki, thank you so much for your hospitality. The beers you suggested were great. So, yeah, there's the little shout out to Nikki at J. Timothy's.
Very nice. Well done. That sounds fantastic. And so with that, we look forward to talking to you in 1 week's time. We hope everyone has a wonderful week. Be well, be safe, have fun. Talk soon.